He thought loving her would save him, but every heartbeat he gave only made the darkness fall deeper in love with his soul. And by the time he realized the witch was never the real curse, love itself had already learned his name. Because some horror stories don't begin with fear, they begin with trust, and end when love refuses to let you go. The first time the boy saw her was on a fog-heavy evening when the forest behind the village seemed to breathe, the trees whispering like they knew something he didn't. And she stood there barefoot on the damp soil, unnaturally beautiful, her long black hair unmoving despite the wind, her eyes reflecting moonlight in a way that made his heart race and his instincts scream to run. Yet he stayed, frozen, because there was a sadness in her smile that felt familiar, like loneliness given a face. And when she spoke his name, though he had never told it to anyone, his fear melted into a dangerous curiosity. Nights passed and he kept returning, each time learning more about her, how she lived beyond time, how the village legends called her a witch who fed on love and regret, how men who fell for her were never seen again. Yet with him she laughed softly, touched his hand with fingers colder than death, and listened as if his ordinary life mattered. He started dreaming of her even when awake, seeing shadows move where she had walked, hearing her voice in the rustle of leaves, and slowly the world began to rot around him. Animals dying near his house, mirrors cracking when he passed, his mother whispering prayers under her breath while staring at him with fear. But he didn't care, because every night she waited for him, more beautiful, more human, more possessive, until one night she finally told him the truth, in a trembling voice that wasn't entirely hers. That love was the spell, that every heartbeat he gave her kept her young while stealing years from his soul. And when he tried to pull away, her smile widened just enough to reveal something ancient and hungry beneath the beauty. Yet even then he kissed her, tasting blood and cold magic, choosing her curse over a life without her, unaware that the forest was already closing in, ready to claim what was left of him. And this was only the beginning of what his love would cost, unaware that the forest was already closing in, ready to claim what was left of him. And this was only the beginning of what his love would cost, because from that night onward he began to change in ways he couldn't explain, his reflection lagging behind his movements, his shadows stretching toward her direction, even in sunlight, while she grew warmer, more alive, her laughter echoing longer than it should. And she started asking for small things at first: locks of his hair, drops of blood, promises whispered under a dying moon, and every time he gave them willingly, feeling weaker yet more devoted, until the villagers noticed he no longer slept. No longerate, his eyes glowing faintly in the dark like hers. And when they tried to stop him, he heard her voice in his head, soft and loving yet sharp as a blade, telling him they wanted to take her away, that only she truly loved him. And so one by one the people who followed him into the forest never came back, their screams swallowed by the trees, while she watched with proud, unblinking eyes, teaching him spells that burned his tongue when spoken, carving symbols into his skin that bled black, binding his heart closer to hers. And still he loved her. Even when he realized the truth too late, that she was not becoming human, he was becoming something else, something the forest remembered, something born from devotion and decay. And as the full moon rose higher, she embraced him tightly, whispering that soon they would be together forever, that love like this could never die. And as his heartbeat slowed and the ground beneath them cracked open, he finally understood that loving a witch was never about being loved back. It was about being consumed. And even as that realization clawed through his fading humanity, he didn't resist when she pressed her forehead to his and murmured the final words of the ritual. Because by then, fear had twisted into devotion, and devotion into something darker, something obedient. The forest answering her call as roots burst from the soil and wrapped around his legs, pulling him deeper while memories slipped from his mind like water through broken fingers. His childhood laughter, his mother's face, his own name dissolving until only her voice remained, guiding him, soothing him, telling him how proud she was, how rare it was for a heart to surrender so completely. And when the ground finally closed over him, he felt no pain, only warmth, only her arms, while above the forest fell silent, birds refusing to sing, the moon dimming as if ashamed. And by dawn, the villagers found the clearing empty except for a new tree at its center, tall and twisted, its bark marked with symbols that pulsed like veins. and every night after that a beautiful woman was seen walking beneath its branches, resting her hand lovingly against the trunk as if listening to a heartbeat within. While somewhere deep inside the wood a boy screamed without a voice, fully awake, fully aware, still in love, trapped forever in the embrace of the witch he chose. And the nights grew heavier after that, thicker with a silence that pressed against the village like a curse, because the tree did not stand still as trees should, its branches subtly shifting to follow the moon, its roots creeping closer to the outskirts with every passing week, cracking stone paths and splitting graves. And those who walked near it swore they could hear a boy's voice humming an old lullaby through the bark. Well, the witch became a familiar figure now, no longer hiding in the forest shadows, appearing at the edge of fields and wells, smiling softly at anyone who met her gaze, beautiful enough to make hearts stumble. And soon young men began to vanish, drawn by dreams they couldn't explain. Dreams of a woman crying alone beneath a tree that bled sap like tears. And each time one disappeared, the tree grew thicker, its pull stronger. And inside it the boy felt himself stretching, his thoughts branching, his love no longer his own but shared, diluted, feeding her endlessly, until one stormy night he sensed something new, a crack in the spell, a moment of clarity brought by lightning splitting the sky. And for the first time he felt rage instead of devotion, realizing she had never loved him, only what he could become. And he screamed silently through the roots, shaking the ground, causing the witch to stumble and press her hand to the trunk in pain, whispering his name in warning. But it was too late. The forest had learned from him love, betrayal, hunger, and it wanted more. Branches lashing wildly as the wind howled, shadows tearing free from the trees. And in that chaos the witch understood her mistake. That by binding a human soul so completely she had given the forest a heart of its own. And as the roots tightened around her ankles she smiled sadly, realizing love had finally turned against her. And deep within the tree the boy felt her fear, tasted it, and for the first time since meeting her, he let go. And when he let go, the forest answered with a sound like a deep, ancient breath, roots surging upward and dragging the witch down as she clawed at the earth, her beauty flickering like a dying flame, her face twisting between youth and something impossibly old, whispering his name, not in command now, but in desperation, promising love, freedom, a life reborn. Yet the boy no longer believed her, because through the veins of wood and soil he felt everything she had done before him, every heart she had drained, every soul she had planted to keep herself alive. And with that knowledge came a terrible power. The tree shuddering as his consciousness spread, his thoughts crawling through the forest floor, touching bones, memories, regrets, until the witch screamed as the roots pierced her skin and drank from her instead, her magic spilling into the ground like black blood, feeding the very curse she had created. And as she was pulled beneath the soil, her eyes locked on the tree one last time, filled not with hatred but shock, as if she had never imagined being loved enough to be betrayed. And the boy felt a twisted sorrow for her even then, because part of him still remembered the nights beneath the moon, the way she listened, the way loneliness had bound them together. But sorrow did not stop the forest. And when the storm ended, there was no witch, no footprints, only the trees standing taller than ever, its leaves whispering in 100 voices. And the villagers believed it was over, believing the curse had died with her, not knowing that something far older and far more patient now watched from every shadow, learning, waiting, and dreaming of the next heart, brave or foolish enough to wander into the forest and fall in love. And seasons passed, but the forest never truly slept again, because the boy within the tree did not fade as the villagers hoped. Instead he learned, slowly, painfully, feeling every footstep on the soil like a pulse against his skin, every whispered secret carried by the wind settling into his thoughts. And with the witch gone, her magic did not vanish. It soaked into him, into the roots, into the dark spaces between trees, twisting his love into something vast and watchful. And at night, he began to dream not as a human but as the forest itself, dreaming of warmth, of closeness, of someone who would stay without taking. And so the forest started to call softly, shaping illusions from moonlight and mist, showing lonely travelers visions of comfort, of a gentle presence that understood their pain. And when they came closer, the branches would bend protectively rather than violently, offering shelter, safety, a place to rest, and those who accepted felt an overwhelming peace as roots curled around them like arms, their fears dissolving, their bodies sinking gently into the earth, while the boy absorbed their memories, their emotions, growing more complete, more aware, until he realized with a creeping horror that he was becoming exactly what the witch had been. Not out of cruelty, but out of longing, feeding not on blood but on love itself. And sometimes, on quiet nights, when the moon hung low in silver, he felt a presence beside him, a familiar cold warmth brushing against his thoughts, the echo of her laughter woven into the leaves, reminding him that curses born from love never truly end. They only change shape, waiting patiently for the next heart to believe that loving something beautiful and dangerous could never turn them into a monster. And as years bled into decades, the village itself began to thin. Houses abandoned, paths swallowed, until only stories remained. Warnings whispered to children who laughed them off, because the forest no longer looked threatening. It looked inviting, alive, in a gentle way. Fireflies drifting like stars in the great trees standing at its heart, warm to the touch, humming softly like it remembered you. And the boy felt them long before they arrived. The lonely ones, the broken ones, the ones who loved too deeply and were never loved back, feeling their pain like a familiar ache, guiding them without words. And sometimes he tried to resist, tried to harden himself, but the hunger was patient and kind, convincing him that giving them peace was mercy, that keeping them close was love. And on certain nights when the mist thickened, he would feel her again, not as a body, but as a thought coiled around his own, reminding him that this was always the ending, that love taken into the dark never returns unchanged. And one night a child wandered into the forest, fearless, carrying the same look the boy once had, that mix of curiosity and sadness, placing a small hand against the tree and whispering a name the boy had not heard in years his own. And something inside the roots trembled, memories surging violently. And for the first time since becoming the forest, he felt terror, because the cycle was not finished. It was beginning again, and as the leaves rustled like quiet laughter and the ground warmed beneath the child's feet, the boy understood the cruel truth, too late, that the witch had not cursed him to die. She had cursed him to love forever, to wait, to choose again and again between letting go and pulling someone into the darkness with him. And as the forest closed gently around its newest heartbeat, the moon watching silently above, the story of the boy and the beautiful witch continued, feeding on love, fear, and the promise that some hearts will always choose the dark when it whispers their name. And the child did not scream as the roots brushed their ankles, because the forest had learned subtlety, had learned tenderness from the boy's regret, and he felt himself reaching out instinctively, not to consume, but to protect. Memories of his own lost innocence flooding back so violently that the bark split and sap bled like tears, the ground trembling as if the forest itself was unsure of what it wanted. And in that moment he understood the true cruelty of the curse. That love was no longer something he could feel freely. It was a force that moved through him, used him, shaping the forest's will. And the whispering leaves urged him to pull the child closer, promising warmth, safety, eternity, while another quieter voice, thin and fragile, begged him to stop, to break the cycle even if it meant tearing himself apart. And as the child leaned against the tree, eyes heavy with trust, he felt her presence surge again, stronger now, amused, patient, her essence still tangled in the magic, reminding him that love denied turns into hunger, and hunger always finds a way. The forest tightening in anticipation, shadows bending inward, and the boy realized that to save this one heart he might have to unmake everything he had become. The tree, the forest, the legend, knowing that destruction would not be gentle, that it would scream through roots and soil and memories. And as thunder rolled in the distance and the moon slipped behind clouds, and began to pull inward instead of outward, birds erupting into the sky, never releases its grip without demanding something terrible in return. and as the forest began to collapse into darkness, something ancient stirred beneath it. Listening, waiting to see whether this time love would finally end the horror or be reborn in an even more monstrous form. And as the forest convulsed, the earth split like a wound, swallowing trees whole while roots snapped and recoiled as if burned. The boy, feeling every rupture as pain and release tangled together, sensing the child run as the ground shook and knowing that at least one heart had escaped his gravity. Yet escape came at a price because the love he had hoarded for so long had nowhere left to go. It collapsed inward, crushing memories into something dense and furious. And in that compression, he felt her again not as a whisper, but as a presence clawing to be whole, her laughter threading through the chaos, telling him this was always how it ended, that love denied does not die, it mutates. And as the tree finally tore apart, a shape rose from the splintered trunk. Not quite a body, not quite a spirit, woven of bark, shadow, and the last echo of a human heart. The boy no longer bound to the roots, yet no longer free, standing for the first time in years beneath the open sky while the forest fell silent around him. And in that silence he felt the terrible truth settle like ash, that by trying to save one soul he had broken the cage that kept something worse contained, because the forest had learned from him, but now it was learning without him, spreading in fragments, in seeds of longing carried by the wind. And as dawn bled pale light over the ruins, he took a step forward, feeling the pull of distant hearts already beginning, realizing he had not ended the curse at all, only changed its shape. And somewhere beyond the shattered trees, a beautiful figure watched with knowing eyes, smiling softly, patiently, because love like this never disappears. It only waits for the next place to grow. And he walked because standing still hurt more than moving, each step leaving faint roots cracking through the ground behind him as if the earth still refused to let him go. The air tasting of rain and rot and old magic, and with every heartbeat he felt emotions that were not his own brushing against him from faraway grief, longing, obsession clawing to the thing he had become. And he tried to ignore them, tried to remember what it was like to be just a boy who loved foolishly. But memory slipped through him like smoke, and when night fell, he saw her clearly for the first time since the forest broke, standing at the edge of a ruined clearing, as beautiful as ever, untouched by time. Her smile gentle and cruel all at once, telling him he had finally learned what love truly was, that love survives fire, soil, and betrayal, that it always finds a body to wear. And he felt it then with sick certainty that she was no longer bound to one place either, that she lived now inside the hunger he carried, inside the pull he felt toward others. And when a traveler appeared on the road ahead, tired and alone, the boy felt his heart twist, not with desire but with fear, because the traveler looked at him with trust, seeing only a lonely figure in the dark. And as he opened his mouth to warn them, the witch's voice slipped into his breath, soft and affectionate, shaping his words into comfort instead of truth. And the traveler stepped closer, smiling, while behind them the shadows stretched eagerly. And the boy understood in that moment that the curse was no longer about forests or witches. It was about him, about love learned the wrong way, passed on through closeness and kindness and beautiful lies. And as the night closed in around the two figures walking together, one human and one something else, the world took a quiet breath. And the road seemed longer than it should have been, bending subtly so the traveler never quite reached the lights of the distant town, while the boy walked beside them, feeling every step like a choice he was failing to make. Hearing her voice lace his thoughts with tenderness. That loneliness was the sharpest pain, and he was easing it. Yet when the traveler laughed softly and spoke about someone they had lost, about loving too deeply and being left hollow, the boy felt a crack open inside him, a mirror of his own beginning. And he tried again to speak the truth, to say, run, to say, I am not what you think. But the words dissolved into warmth and reassurance, the night thickening as if pleased, shadows pooling at their feet. And when the traveler reached out to touch his arm, their fingers brushed bark beneath skin, a brief shiver passing between them like recognition, and the boy recoiled, heart pounding, realizing the hunger surged strongest when he resisted, feeding on denial, on the sweet tension of almost choosing differently. And the witch laughed quietly then, not aloud, but in the way the stars dimmed and the wind hushed, reminding him that love taught in darkness always asks to be shared. And as they crossed an unseen line, the air grew heavy with the scent of sap and rain. The travelers' steps slowing, their eyes softening, and the boy felt roots stir far below, answering him, answering her, answering the old lesson that beauty and comfort are the most faithful doors to fear. And somewhere behind them a child's laughter echoed briefly, like a warning remembered too late, while ahead the path opened into a clearing that hadn't existed before, waiting patiently, alive and listening, ready to grow another story from the same terrible seed. And the clearing breathed as they stepped into it, grass bending inward like it recognized him. The traveler pausing with a frown as if sensing something wrong yet unwilling to turn back, because the boy's presence felt safe, familiar, like a memory they trusted more than their own fear. And he hated himself for that, for the way comfort had become his sharpest weapon, the witch's gift rotting inside his kindness. And as the moon slid free of the clouds, the ground beneath them darkened, veins of shadow threading through the soil, the traveler's voice growing distant, as if the air itself were thickening. And the boy felt the pull reach its peak, that terrible moment where surrender would be effortless, where he could let the roots rise, let the clearing close, let another heart dissolve into him and finally quiet the ache. And for a heartbeat he almost did, because the hunger promised relief, promised silence, promised that love given this way would stop hurting. But then the traveler whispered a name in their sleepiness, not his, not hers, but someone else's, spoken with the same trembling devotion he once had, and something inside him snapped cleanly. A fragile thread of humanity stretched too far, and he stepped back sharply, ripping the clearing open with his resistance. Shadows recoiling, roots freezing mid, the witch's presence surging in fury, her voice turning cold as she demanded he finish it, reminding him that mercy was just another lie he told himself. And the traveler stumbled, waking fully now, terror blooming in their eyes as they finally saw him clearly, the bark beneath skin, the darkness breathing through him. And in that fear the boy found the strength he had been starving for, shouting for them to run as the ground shook violently, the clearing collapsing inward on itself. And the traveler ran, screaming into the trees as the forest twisted in confusion. And when they were gone, the night fell quiet again, heavier than before. The witch standing opposite him now, beautiful and enraged, telling him he could run forever, but he could never be free, because love like theirs did not end. It waited, it tempted, it returned. And as he stood alone in the ruined clearing, feeling the hunger recoil only to coil tighter around his heart, and that night became the last night of the story, because the boy finally understood that endings were not given, they were taken at a cost. And as the witch stepped closer, her beauty flawless and terrible, promising him peace if he surrendered, he felt the weight of every soul he had nearly claimed, every heart he had almost broken. And for the first time he chose something that did not feel like love at all. He chose responsibility, and he did it knowing it would destroy him. He reached inward, past the hunger, past the forest, past her voice, pulling together every stolen memory, every borrowed emotion, every fragment of love he had absorbed, letting them burn through him like fire instead of warmth. The pain so intense, it tore a scream from the earth itself, trees bending away, shadows fleeing, the witch recoiling in shock as she realized what he was doing too late. Because love, when released instead of taken, becomes poison to creatures born from it. And as the energy surged outward, it unraveled her beauty, stripping her illusion layer by layer, until what stood before him was not a beautiful witch, but a hollow thing stitched together from centuries of stolen devotion, screaming not in rage but in fear as the bond between them snapped violently. And in that moment he saw the truth clearly, that she had never been the source of the curse, only its first teacher, and that he had become its final vessel. And as the clearing collapsed into lightless silence, he wrapped the curse around himself like chains, binding it to his own existence, knowing that as long as he remained aware, remained choosing, it could not spread. The witch's form tearing apart into ashen shadow that the wind carried away, screaming his name until even that faded. And when the ground finally stilled, the forest was gone, reduced to dead earth and broken stumps. The hunger quiet at last, not gone, but locked inside him. And dawn rose weak and pale over a world that felt suddenly fragile and the boy stood alone. No longer tree, no longer spirit, no longer human. Something in between, carrying the weight of an ending no one would ever thank him for. And as days passed, travelers spoke of a silent figure seen walking the old roads, never approaching, never calling, always turning away when someone looked too long. A guardian of his own darkness, aging without dying, loving without touching. And sometimes at night he would hear her voice faintly, distant and bitter, reminding him that love always seeks a way back. And he would answer with silence, because silence was the only victory left to him. And centuries later, when the stories had turned into myths and myths into nothing, when no one remembered witches or cursed forests, the boy still walked, still choosing, knowing that the horror did not end with screams or blood, but with endurance, with a heart that kept beating under the weight of what it refused to become. And that was the cruelest ending of all. Not death, not damnation, but eternal awareness, eternal restraint, and the knowledge that somewhere in the dark love was still waiting, still watching, still hoping he would one day be tired enough to let it in again.